your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us for a look back at Alberta this week. An Edmonton police officer who participated in a rally against COVID-19 restrictions then thanked protesters and posted a video suggesting vaccine mandates were unlawful and unsafe will keep her job. A disciplinary hearing for Edmonton Police Service Constable Alina Golasheva wrapped up on Wednesday. She was relieved of duty without pay for taking part in the protests early last year that blocked the U.S. border crossing in Coutts, Alberta for more than 2 weeks. A police spokesperson said on Thursday that instead of being fired, Golasheva will now return to active duty following her involvement in a reintegration hearing. More people are being allowed back into a northern Alberta First Nations community that had been evacuated due to a wildfire. Residents of Fort Chipewyan were forced to leave on May 30th, and the blaze is now considered under control. Earlier this week, essential services were being restored. On Thursday, most residents were being allowed back via boat and plane, but those who are vulnerable or have unique needs must wait. An evacuation order remains in effect, however, for Little River Cree Nation and Fox Lake. There are still close to 3,700 people who have been evacuated from their homes in our province. Just over $33 million has been sent to support evacuees, with close to 26,000 applications being processed. On Friday, there were 79 active wildfires burning across the province, 41 of which are under control, 10 out of control, and 28 are being held. We are just days away from Canada Day, when the Trudeau government's second carbon tax will kick in. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says her government will do its part to help Albertans continue to get a break at the pumps. The province announced that the provincial fuel tax will be paused until the end of December. Officials say Albertans will save 13 cents per litre every time they fill up until the end of the year. This translates to an Alberta family saving between $6 and $18 each time their vehicle is filled up.
Pausing the full fuel tax on gasoline and diesel for the rest of the calendar year will put hundreds of millions of dollars back into the pockets of Albertans. But lower gas prices don't just leave more money in your pockets every time you fill up, so that you and your families can save more of your hard-earned money. It also means lower costs to deliver services and supplies that Albertans need to live. Whether it's groceries, baby formula, or laundry detergent, lower fuel costs means shipping products to stores costs less, meaning that you'll be paying less for the things your family needs at the checkout.
A group of licensed practical nurses in our province, including right here in southern Alberta, are seeking reclassification for their work titles. They want to be known as direct nursing care workers instead of auxiliary nursing care staff. BCN's Micah Quinn chatted with members of LPNs for Change, who say they were surprised by recent comments from the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees saying the application is bound to fail.
The group LPNs for Change submitted an application to the Alberta Labour Relations Board requesting to transfer LPNs from the Auxiliary Nursing Care Bargaining Unit to the Direct Nursing Care Unit.
AHS, Covenant Health remain neutral. Health Science Association also remain neutral. AUPE, CUPE, and United Steelworkers, they are against.
The Alberta Union of Provincial Employees and the United Steelworkers Union put in a request for the group to submit a response to the dismissal by Monday. Staff from the organization said they have garnered additional support from LPNs within Alberta who have rallied to their cause.
Just before I came on this interview, I was just copying the 854th name over to the list, and that's in a week.
Staff from LPNs for Change say reclassification is more about respect and acknowledging the hard work that LPNs put in, rather than people thinking they are just trying to receive a pay bump. Members of the group highlighted the main differences between auxiliary nursing care and direct nursing care.
We assess our patients, we give them medication, we dressing change, we do a whole bunch of things that nurses do, like giving blood, giving injections and whatnot, and then we see how that works. Whereas auxiliary nursing, like I said earlier, is just helping nurses, so they would help nurses to help people feed the food, change the clothes, toilet them, walk them around to make sure that they have an ample amount of exercise. That is what they need in part of their care plan.
I always tell them, you're the heart and soul of this place. You know those residents better than anybody. Their job is that is their job, to know them.
Bridge City News reached out to AUPE for comment on the story, but we have yet to hear back.
Coming up after the break, was Alberta's premier censored by Facebook? And Alberta MLAs return to the legislature to pick a speaker. All that and more is coming up right after this short break. Alberta MLAs returned to the legislature this week to pick a speaker, and the winner was Nathan Cooper once again. And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith claimed she had lost the ability to post to Facebook for 24 hours. To talk about these issues and more, our very own Hal Roberts sat down with our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Take a look.
Now, Tyler, in a bit of a strange saga, Premier Smith says she was censored by Facebook and that she had lost her abilities to post for about 24 hours. Now, Meta, the company which owns Facebook, said that's not actually what happened. It's that one of her administrators of her Facebook page lost privileges and that Smith herself could still post.
It was unclear what she might have posted that would have led to it. She said there wasn't an explanation from Facebook. So reporters sort of reached out to Meta and they said, no, this was an administrator, which of course that makes sense, right? Politicians don't exclusively manage their own Facebook pages or Twitter pages or social media generally. They have staff who handle these things. And so one of those people had been suspended or had their account privileges limited. And so obviously there was a bit of a disconnect there. Smith saying censorship, Facebook saying, no, this wasn't censorship at all. And Smith said, once she got her posting privileges back, she said, I hope this never happens again. And she posted a screenshot of the sort of notice. And it said that there was a security issue identified with one of the administrators. So very weird little quirk in the early days of Smith's premiership. But you can see the political benefit in it for her. The conservative movement is, broadly speaking, concerned about free expression, is broadly concerned about censorship, and so this probably looked like that to Smith's office. It's just that didn't quite pan out the way that they thought it had.
MLAs returned to the legislature this week to pick a speaker, and the winner once again was Nathan Cooper. Now, Tyler, also on Tuesday, Premier Smith offered up an apology. What did she apologize for?
Well, this goes back to the ethics commissioner report on her phone call to Tyler Shandro about the charges against Artur Pawlowski, the Calgary street preacher. The call to Pawlowski himself was not the subject of the ethics commissioner investigation, but the call to Shandro was, and the ethics commissioner concluded that Smith had broken the Conflicts of Interest Act. And so this was a big campaign issue. It landed sort of with a week or two left in the campaign, and doesn't seem to have made a huge impact on the campaign, I wouldn't say, but obviously a big event on the campaign trail. So she rose in the legislature and apologized and said she intended to do nothing wrong. She had no nefarious means here, but she accepts the commissioner's ruling and that sort of thing.
Tyler, Premier Smith recently met with our country's Natural Resources Minister, Jonathan Wilkinson, and Dominic LeBlanc, the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. What came out of that meeting? Did Premier Smith really stick up for our natural resource sector?
It sounds like it. The point of disagreement between the two governments is basically the net zero electricity grid plan by 2035, I think, and the cap on reduction, I should say, on oil and gas sector emissions of 40%, I believe, and the Alberta government's net zero by 2050 plan. So these align, broadly speaking, with some of the goals the federal government has, but there's definitely some differences on how to get there, whether there's going to be benchmark targets. The natural gas and the electricity grid thing is a huge sticking point for the Alberta government. So, the outcome of it was essentially friendly, in the scheme of Alberta and Ottawa relations, I would say. No one came out of that meeting, sort of screaming their heads off. There was a clear agreement to continue to work on these problems and try and find areas of common ground. Now, we don't know what any of that's going to look like. Is the federal government going to back off on anything? Are there going to be adjusted timetables or reporting rules, anything like that? So this could be a fight coming for both of them, but and it certainly seems like Smith has drawn her line in the sand. She said she will not be a part of or will not sort of participate in the Sustainable Jobs Act stuff. That's the the rebranded Just Transition stuff. So, but a little bit of a détente, I think, it would be fair to conclude at this point.
So do you think Smith will actually bring forward the Alberta Sovereignty Act?
It's not totally clear to me, and I'm not sure it's totally clear to anyone else either, what exactly, practically speaking, using the Sovereignty Act would mean. But I think it's a possibility for sure, although, I can imagine those debates in the legislature and the response from the federal government would be pretty intense.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, does the suggestion to change part of Canada's national anthem provide the opportunity to address more serious problems facing Indigenous communities? The answer to that is up next. Canada just observed National Indigenous Peoples Day on Wednesday, which is part of June being National Indigenous History Month. It's a chance to highlight and really dig into the issues facing the Indigenous people of our country. For instance, does the suggestion to change part of Canada's national anthem provide the opportunity to address more serious problems facing Indigenous communities? It might seem that this one idea to change a word in our national anthem is the opportunity to set a table for discussion and to help shed some light on what should take priority. Southern Alberta resident Cheyenne McGuinness is a social media influencer, an entrepreneur, and owner of Indig Busyness. She joined Jeanette Roche to share her perspective on where the conversation needs to start. Have a look.
Tell me what it means to you that the country has designated this time to think about and focus on the issues, or is it just an empty gesture in your eyes? What do you think?
I think it's a nice gesture, I guess you could say, but it can feel a little empty to some of us, especially us activists who are working towards bigger goals with the Canadian government, and just really looking at social goals of Indigenous peoples is really important during this month, and highlighting some of those in the way of awareness, just kind of looking at what we can do in the future as well as the present to change the past. And I think that that's really important, to look to the past a lot during this month and see what can be done differently.
So interesting. Okay, so I opened up by mentioning the anthem. So recently, the Mississauga, Ontario mayor, she tabled a motion to ask the federal government to officially change the lyrics of the Canadian national anthem. So the proposal came forward to change the words from "our home and native land" to "our home on native land." So what's your opinion of this?
Well, I think that that's also a good gesture, but it's a little bit empty in terms of that there is other issues, especially with my business. We really look at business and reconciliation. And in the past little while, there have been deals signed that haven't really gone towards that place of reconciliation. They're still trying to push pipelines through. They're still trying to do mining and resource extraction on native lands, as well as burying nuclear waste in Treaty 3 territory. That was something that came up over the past year. And there was coal mining even brought forward in Treaty 7 territory, where I am, where I live and have been born into the Treaty 7 territory and their people. So I think it's really interesting that we have these kind of gestures, but there's no real action sometimes from the Canadian government. It just kind of feels like we say things and they're not taken to heart, because, again, I was at that mining and minerals discussion in 2018 and felt like my voice wasn't heard and all of that, specifically speaking to the extraction of our resources from native lands, and just that the profit doesn't always necessarily stay in Canada or go to Canadians. So I think that that's really something I like to focus on more, is the bigger picture of where we're standing in terms of society and economy and the global economy as well.
Okay, so when we hear about change, then to better honor Indigenous people in Canada, where would you suggest that the change begin?
I think it starts with that awareness of the issues we face, as well as just the uneven playing field that has been given to us as Indigenous peoples in this society. And, we want to start looking at wealth generation and just kind of like generational wealth as well is really important to me as an Indigenous woman, is to create that base for my future and my future legacy, and what it means to really be an ancestor today, so that your future children and future grandchildren will have a better future than you even had today.
Coming up after the break, when we hear about pollution across the world, where does Canada's output stand in perspective with other nations? The founder of a movement that encourages Canadians to support the natural resource sectors of our nation shares his thoughts. He gives insights on how our oil and gas sector will continue to thrive in a country that mandates electric vehicle sales. That interview with Cody Battershill of Canada Action is coming right up. Even if all cars in Canada were electric by the year 2040, our demand for oil and gas will continue to be robust. That is according to Cody Battershill, the founder of Canada Action. They are a volunteer-led grassroots movement encouraging Canadians to take action in support of the natural resource sectors of our nation. He explains why the outlook is positive for the oil and gas sector in this interview with Jeanette Roche.
One of the things that many people do appreciate about Canada Action, your organization, are your infographics. So one thing that caught our eye was about electric cars. So it says that if all the cars were electric by 2040, the world would demand for oil and gas, the world demand for oil and gas would actually be at 2013 levels. So maybe can you give a few more details about the worldwide demand for oil and natural gas?
Yeah, so when we talk about electric cars, it's important to think about how those cars are made. They're made from a lot of mining. They're made from a lot of advanced plastics and composites. The batteries are quite heavy, so the cars have to be as light as possible in every other part of their production, and that's oil and natural gas derived petrochemicals. And so even if the trajectory of electric vehicle growth continues as it's trending, we're still going to see robust oil demand. One study had said that oil demand would be around 90 million barrels a day. Another recent projection from the U.S. Energy and Information Administration said that in 2040, 2050, oil demand will still be about the level it is today. So even if it's not growing, that's still an Olympic-sized swimming pool of oil every 5-10 seconds that the globe is consuming. And yeah, let's support all energy sources and electric vehicles, but let's continue to support Canada's natural economic strengths. And a key part of that is oil and natural gas production that we do responsibly, and I would argue better than almost anywhere else in the world.
Okay, well, Cody, this list might be too long, but what products are made from petrochemicals? Can you maybe describe what our world would look like without oil and gas?
Well, I mean, Vaclav Smil is a great author, Bill Gates' favorite author, and he's a professor in Winnipeg at the university. And he says that the modern world is built on 4 fundamental materials, and that's cement, steel, ammonia, and plastic. And all of those require fossil fuels. And there's no immediate way today to switch out the fossil fuel components. Let's talk about ammonia and natural gas-based fertilizers. Currently, those fertilizers are feeding about half the world. We don't always think about how that fertilizer is made, but natural gas is a tremendous part of that. in Canada, in Alberta, when it's minus 40, what are we going to do for heat? What are we going to do for the plastics in hospitals? We start life in a hospital, and unfortunately, we often will end our lives in a hospital. Those plastics, those advanced materials are a fundamental part of modern medicine and our expanded lifetimes, life expectancies as humans in Canada and humans around the world. So, you know, when you look around your house, every single thing, everything you eat, everything you do, everything you own, everything you've ever done is made possible by natural resources. It's not always obvious, but oil and natural gas is a core component of everything we have, everything we do. Not just gasoline, not just plastics for the electric vehicle, but everything else I've detailed. It's incredibly important we have these more balanced conversations about this topic.
When we hear about pollution across the world, can you help put Canada's pollution output into perspective when compared to other nations or regions?
Yeah, and you know, we got to talk. So we can talk about emissions, we can talk about land, we can talk about water. I think when we talk about one quick stat regarding emissions would be that we are actually a global leader in reducing methane and flaring from our oil and gas industry. So there's a study done by the U of C that said if the rest of the world copied our standards, the average emissions from barrel of oil would reduce by 23% oil production, the upstream production emissions. That's about taking 100 million cars off the road. And if we want to talk right now about reducing global impacts, getting as much Canadian liquefied natural gas to Asia and the world will absolutely have the largest immediate impact on reducing global emissions. That's climate action today. And people that are saying shut it down are ignoring the reality of how they live, how we live, the impacts, and the massive global positives that Canadian oil and natural gas brings.
To watch the full-length versions of these last 3 interviews, head on over to our website, bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel and give us a like and subscribe to stay up to date on new content that publishes daily. After the break, stories from around southern Alberta. Police in Lethbridge have charged a 62-year-old man with more than 24 weapons and drug offenses. Following a short-term investigation of drug trafficking activity in the downtown core, police executed a search warrant at an apartment along the 300 block of 5th Street South on June 16th. It was then that they discovered a large quantity of weapons. Police found a rifle, crossbow, airsoft pistols, homemade zip guns, and a homemade long barrel shotgun. They also confiscated various pills, suspected methamphetamine, drug paraphernalia, and cash. Richard Latrimo of Lethbridge faces various charges, including drug possession, 6 counts of possession of an offensive weapon, and 2 counts of manufacturing a firearm or weapon. He was released from custody and will be in court on July 4th. Lethbridge police are warning the public after suspected fentanyl, shaped to look like a candy bear, was found in Gulf Gardens. On Tuesday, a member of the downtown policing unit located an unattended bag on the east side of the park. Inside was a small quantity of suspected fentanyl, colored greenish blue in a bear shape that could be mistaken for candy. The bag also included suspected fentanyl pieces in other colors. Using bright colors or molds to create certain shapes is not uncommon for the illicit production of fentanyl. It's a trend that has emerged in recent years across Canada and the U.S. The city of Lethbridge celebrated National Indigenous Peoples Day on Wednesday. Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike joined forces to shine a light on the important event. Kirby Smith, one of the directors of the Blackfoot Confederacy Tribal Council, explained what the day means to him.
It's so critical for us to have a clear understanding of, who we are as a people, who we are, like in terms of our presence, in our traditional territory, and just understanding the kind of strengths and the kind of efforts and initiatives that we can bring to the table, with the idea that we're trying to overcome some of these obstacles. We talked about homelessness and so on. So I think it's a day to remind us of that, as well as a day that sort of marks a very special spiritual occasion for us as well.
Echo Novak, the Indigenous Relations Specialist with the City of Lethbridge, says this day is all about coming together as a community.
We always hear about the tragedies, and we hear about all the grief that is in our community. And today is really about learning about our culture, about celebrating our culture, celebrating the diverse different nations that live in Lethbridge. And it really puts a focus on what we like to do, and that's coming together as a community and laughing and celebrating.
Earlier on Wednesday, Lethbridge College helped raise a teepee in Galt Gardens in honor of National Indigenous Peoples Day. Lethbridge City Council was recently buzzing with excitement as they officially voted Lethbridge to become a bee city to raise awareness on the importance of pollinators. It was also Pollinator Week, and the little critters like bees are key contributors to our food supply. Video journalist Micah Quinn met up with officials to discuss Pollinator Week, along with the decline of these insect pollinators in recent years.
According to Megan Evans, the president of the Alberta Native Bee Council, some bumblebee species are even facing extinction.
Bumblebees are even listed as endangered on the Federal Species at Risk Act, which is kind of a big deal, and we've seen major declines in those species. More concerning, perhaps, is the fact that 60% of those native bee species are data deficient, and that means that we simply don't know enough about them to say how they're doing, which is very concerning.
Back in May, at a Lethbridge City Council meeting, Councillor Jeff Carlson brought forward a motion asking city administration staff to apply for Lethbridge to become a bee city. Council voted 7-2 in favor of the motion.
I think this is something that we could actually use to bring the region together. If everyone else signed on and we were all bee cities, and it might be even something that tourism could latch on to.
Corrine Putman, the manager of the Helen Schuler Nature Center, told us pollinators have a huge role to play in maintaining our food supply and ecosystem.
It's estimated that almost 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we put in our mouth are courtesy of a pollinator. So if you like things like kiwis or oranges or raspberries or pears, even things like chocolate, it is essential that we have healthy pollinator populations to be able to sustain the food that keeps us healthy.
For more information on Pollinator Week, you can visit the Helen Schuler Nature Center website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The number of parents choosing to homeschool their children has seen a huge increase in both the U.S. and Canada over the last number of years. After the break, we hear from a homeschool facilitator who explains why this is happening.